I'm delighted to be joined in conversation with Tom Chapman. Tom is a fellow author, he's a TED talker, he's a mental health advocate and campaigner. And they say the three most important professions in the world. Number one is a parent, number two is an educator, and my wife reliably informs me that third is hairdressing. And Tom, you fit the bill for at least two of those. You're very, very welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for tracking me down and inviting me to be here with you.
Well, Tom, you've been on my radar for some time. In Ireland, I'm on the board of directors of Cycle Against Suicide, and we
Yeah.
advocate for mental health in all schools in Ireland, both north and south. And you've been a pioneer in this field. And as I say, you're a hairdresser of some renown and repute around the world now. But I understand that an Irish man was part of your journey towards the Lions Barbers Collective and the mental health journey you've been on. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. So I mean, there's there's been a couple of really Irish guys. I mean, when we first started, the idea was I gathered it was meant to be a one-off project. This whole thing. It was meant to be a collection of haircut images that I got together. It was a catalogue, and it was going to be one of those things that you go into your barbershop, pick it up, choose your haircut, and it was also try and raise awareness around mental health. And then when we first started, I gathered all the barbers that I knew that were high profile at the time, and there were a couple there. There was a guy called Pat Barry, and there was one called Paul Mack who was really quite special. He was a good friend of mine. I still talk to him now, but he helped. I put it out suggestions to the group. Said, right, so we've got a group of barbers. What should we call ourselves? And he said, what about Lions Barber Collective? Because we're like the Lions, like the rugby team. England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales get together, play rugby. We're Lions like that. And ironically, Paul Mack was actually the guy who when I said, what should we make this book for? Because this book was originally, it was going to be a I wanted to do it for charity, but didn't know what. And Paul Mack actually said to me, what about suicide prevention? And that just blew my mind because I had lost a friend to suicide 12 months before, and I was completely unaware that you could raise money for suicide prevention. I didn't realize there was mental health charities. And I thought if I've been hit by this and hit hard and didn't know that there was any of these things, how many people out there are suffering alone? How many people out there have lost someone close to them? How many people are having suicide thoughts and don't know where to turn? And it just really hit home that Paul Mack suggested that to me, and I thank him for that because it just opened my eyes to the fact that this is something I could do and something that I've been affected by.
Good health is the crown that well people wear that only the sick can see. And you have mentioned, Tom, that our mental health is something that affects all of us. And you're in a very interesting role. The relationship between barber and client is a very confessional one. And I wonder, could you speak to the power of relationships and the cathartic power of listening?
I think as hairdressers and barbers, we are in a hugely privileged position. We're trusted by people. I mean, okay, we build up, there's two ends of the spectrum. We build up relationships with people. I've known people for 20 years. I have cut their hair when they had no children, and I cut their hair when they went on their first date with their now wives. They've now got multiple children. They've shown me wedding rings, engagements. They've shown me shared babies' names. It's everything. You know, I've been there for their entire life. I mean, I know one of the people whose hair, I remember washing her hair when I was 18. I started at Tony and Guy, and now her daughter is now a lecturer at university. And you think, how is that even possible that I've seen that whole journey, but I've been there. But then at the same time, you have people who you've never met before, and they come and sit in your chair for the first time. You shake their hand, then all of a sudden you're running your fingers through their hair, and you're holding a cut throat razor against their neck, and they trust you. And there's just that confidentiality, there's the intimacy, there's the human contact, there's the 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, however long you spend with your hairstylist or barber, where you have no interruptions. You're not on your phone. You're actually having human contact. And I just think that the conversation flows because of that reason. And we're having that's becoming less and less in this time, isn't it? We're having less and less conversations. And you think about COVID, we've been isolated. And I had a guy who come to me on we had July the 4th was the day we went back to cutting hair in the summer last year. And everyone called it Trim Dependence Day over here. But I cut this guy's hair. I've known him for a long time. He was fine, had a consultation. And as soon as I started cutting his hair, he started crying. And I stopped and come around to the front of him and spoke to him and asked him what was going on and how he's feeling and what brought this on. And he said, "Look, there's nothing wrong, but I live by myself and I haven't had human contact in 3 months. We've been through lockdown. I just, well, as soon as you touched me, I just had this overwhelming emotions that just it only came out in tears." And you think we underestimate how important that is, that human touch and that contact in those 30 minutes to an hour where we just have a conversation, human to human, and how ingrained in us that is and how much we actually need that. So I think it's the perfect space to have conversations and realize the value of them.
We're hardwired for connection. And
Yeah.
as a guidance counselor, in the last couple of years, kids presenting issues have changed. And a lot of young people come into me now, Tom, and they're lonely. They've
Mm.
connections a mile wide, but they're an inch deep. And listening to you on a conversation you had with Chris Evans, the broadcaster, you mentioned something that I wasn't aware of, that in the UK, you have a minister for loneliness and you were in the process of meeting them. I'm curious, how did that conversation go? And could you speak to that a little bit about the power of connection in a world where people are lonely?
Yeah, look, Diana Barron was amazing. It was a great conversation with her, and she valued the hairdresser, she valued the barber. She has hair, she has her haircut, she understood the relationship there, and I think it's very saying that we need a minister of loneliness. I think how can we be so lonely in a world where we're so connected now? Like you say, we're all, well, I'm talking to you via a video phone. If you'd given me this 20 years ago, it would have been like mind blowing. And we've always got these things going off, and it's constant, isn't it? And I think actually we feel like we need to connect with others, and we feel like we are connected with others. But like you say, it's a mile wide, but it's an inch deep. It's very shallow. It's not true emotional connection. We end up comparing ourselves constantly.
Mm,
I mean, you've probably heard the phrase "comparison is a thief of joy,"
yeah.
and I think it really is. I think we would normally maybe keeping up with the Joneses and next door neighbours or whoever, those on the street. The grass is green on the other side of your fence. But now we're trying to compare ourselves to these celebrities and these people that we follow all the way around, and we think we've got loads of friends because we're talking to all these people. But that true communication and that lack of conversation is massive. And I think I find it a lot of the time when we're getting cutting young people's hair, that art of conversation is dwindling a little bit. I think, and people are very almost scared, I think, to have that conversation with somebody because they're so used to talking to each other through these things. So I think yeah, conversation is so important. Loneliness strikes definitely, and I think the fact that we've got a loneliness minister is very telling of our times. We all need to love and be loved. We all need to belong. We all need that.
The last 18 months of the pandemic, Tom, have been both turbulent and traumatic for us all. But I'm wondering, is there an opportunity there? I know myself, I was speaking to a colleague some months ago, and I just asked, "How are you?" And in Ireland, we have an awful habit of saying, "All right, I'm grand," whether we're, whatever state we might be, we'll say we're grand. And
Yeah.
something spoke to me just to follow it up and say, "How are you really?" And the person stopped, and I remember it very vividly and said, "You know what, John? I'm overwhelmingly overwhelmed. I'm having
Mm.
my lunch in the car and I'm scared for the first time. I don't want to be a teacher anymore. I'm afraid of what I'm going to bring home." And I had a moment of authentic communication with that colleague, probably more in that 60 seconds than I'd had in the previous 6 years, Tom. And I'm wondering, is there an opportunity in this pandemic for us to have more authentic conversation? Because I would share with you the concern that particularly young people, I suspect all of us maybe, are losing that conversation intelligence that it's so important to us, Tom. I wonder what would your comments be on that?
There's a few things there you've sort of made me think there about a couple of things that I've said a couple of times. I think that the men, the pandemic has been awful. It's been this huge black cloud looming over us, and overwhelmingly overwhelmed is such a phrase for now because I think we're all feeling that we don't know what we're allowed to do, what we can do, what we should be doing. Some people are very, some people seem to don't care at all. Some people are very scared, and I think, but I do think that one of the silver linings of that big black pandemic cloud is that I think everyone's realized we have mental health. Everyone has been through something in the last 18 months to 2 years. Everyone has, whether you've been frontline, whether you've been, I don't know, furloughed, whether you've been, whatever, working through it, we've all had those moments. And I know I have. And I would say I actually quite enjoyed it because I was with my family, but I wasn't traveling the world cutting hair. I was actually at home. But there's also moments we lost people, and it was very difficult as well. And but I'd also think, those conversations are so important. And I think that uh, when it comes to our mental well-being, it's very easy now to say there's not enough help. We're going to have to wait. We're going to do this. There's nothing for me, and it kind of almost becomes an excuse not to look for something and not to do these things. So actually, I think that it's really important that we take some responsibility as a community, and say to each other, "Look, I'm here if you need me." And I think that's one of the biggest things I've done is I told people publicly for the last 6 years I'm a safe space, and I can't go out for a night out in Torquay where I live without at least one person coming up to me and going, "You're the guy that does the mental health stuff." When I say yes, they go, "Well, I've been going through this." And they just open up and offload to me there and then without me even asking them a question. So I think it's really important, and something we do for our training is that we train people how to recognize the signs, how to ask good questions, how to listen well with empathy and without judgment, and how to help them person find the help they need. So that conversation that you had there is so important. Stopping them, and we always say, "How's it going? Are you all right?" And it's just a hello. It's not an actual question, is it? It's almost a tick box.
Mm.
So by you going, "How are you really feeling? How are you really feeling today, Sean? How are you, putting it in this moment? How are you feeling right now?" And using people's names will give them that opportunity to talk. And even one of the great questions that I like to say to someone is, "Would you, how are you feeling? Would you like to talk to me about whatever it may be?" And sometimes people say, "No, no, I'm fine, honestly." And then use that as a backup for the second question to say, or statement more, "If you need to talk to me, I'm here." And just to let you know. And quite often, when you say that a second time, you see the cogs going, and within 30 seconds, they'll say to me, "Actually, do you know what? I've had a bit of a rough time with this or that." And I think being prepared we're telling people to talk, aren't we? All the time. But it's being prepared to listen and being prepared to react well, because the problem is if we tell everyone to talk and someone opens up and you react badly, that person then isn't going to open up again, probably.
So
Yeah.
you're saying, I don't want you to fix me. I just need to be
Yeah.
listened to. And the
Yeah.
greatest gift that you can give somebody is your attention. And sometimes in the teaching space, without the access to those talk therapies, Tom, teachers are scared sometimes. In my experience, they don't know what to say. But I think you're flagging the idea is just to say, "How are you?" and to give the green light to have that conversation, to create a space where a person feels comfortable connecting. You're not asking anyone to fix anybody, but just to give somebody a good talking to.
Yeah, well, yeah. Look, most people know what they need to do to fix or solve their problems, don't they? I know deep down what I need to do to fix and solve the issues in my life. But having that, no one wants to be told, but by having that platform to be heard, a lot of people will eventually fix and solve their own issues. If when you get it out of here and out of here, it becomes a bit more a sense of clarity and an ability to be able to just go, "Actually, yeah, that is a good idea." And I've done that multiple times now with people, and I'll say to them at the end of the conversation, "So when are you going to go and do that then? And when are you going to go and when are you going to go to that place and do this?" And they go, "That's a really good idea. I didn't come up with that idea. They just told me that." But I gave them that opportunity to be able to be heard, and that's the difference, isn't it?
The more you give to other people, the more you need to give to yourself. And it strikes me, Tom, that 18-year-old Tom Chapman and where you are now is in a completely different space than you envisaged. How do you look after yourself on a down day, Tom?
We all have down days. We all have tough times. I had a particularly rough week. The other week, we were at a hair show. I had a friend of mine's wife, called me to tell me that he had attempted, and wanted to know how to look after him and what to do. And then I had another friend of mine attempt that week, and another friend of mine who's not going through a great place. His mother died, and I was that person that they all come to, and so that was training. But I also feel very grateful that I can be that person for them. But I know that when I'm in that position, it's time to step back, take a day off, don't look at my emails, do something that I enjoy, spend some time with my family. I'm very lucky with my wife's great. I've got a great support group with my trustees, and we all have those good and bad days. And just working out what fits right for you is the key.
It's important to be strategically selfish, that investing in your own capacity is the single biggest investment you can make in your ability to help the people in your care or in your contact list. Tom, you mentioned social media, and I'm just curious. A lot of people find themselves comparing their unedited lives to the curated lives and the highlight reels of successful people, and consequently never feel enough or happy enough. Do you feel that some people feel almost guilty for not being happy? And I'm saying that in the context of being sad, being mad, being bad is not a mental illness. It's part and parcel of being a human being. And we're not a kind of we're not a multi-purpose wrench designed to snap out and snap into things. And I'm just curious, do you feel that some people find that comparison is the thief of joy, as you've
Yeah.
said?
Yeah, but what is happy? Do you know what I mean? What is happy? What is happy is an individual thing to everyone else. And I think
Yeah.
if all the time you're looking out trying to find happy in other people's happiness or happiness that was perceived to us through whatever posts they're living, the life they're living. I mean, it's about it, I think we in this day and age we look at happiness or success as fame and fortune, don't we? We're very much in this kind of world. And actually, if you only ever want money or fame, you're never going to have enough because if you get £1 million in the bank, you think now, I think, God, if I had £1 million, I'd be happy. But once you get there, a few months later, that's normal. It becomes normal. And the same with fame. If someone had said to me, when I was 18, for example, and I started out at Tony and Guy, your picture is going to be on the front cover of Hairdresser's Journal, I would have flipped my lid and said, no way, never. And I had an email today from them, the company, Modern Barber magazine, as part of the company, asking if we'd be up for being on the cover ourselves, a picture of all us and our lions. Like I couldn't have dreamt of that, but that's very normal for me now. That's kind of become, I'm not saying all that, yeah, but that's just become part of my everyday life. If you're only ever searching for that, you will never have enough. And I think it's about stepping back and going, fame and fortune, yeah, that's okay, but actually, what's going to make me happy in this moment, and take pride in some of the things we have rather than what's the next thing we want. There was an interesting thing I saw with Darren Brown. I did something with him, and he was talking on stage, he's talking about your mobile phone and saying how everybody wants the new mobile phone, and they want it, and they get the new one, and they discard the old one, and then within a day, it's just their phone. But they never take time to look back at the phone and go, that phone helped me get from here to here. It had phone calls between me and my family. I helped my loved one through this. I met my loved one through this on an app. I did this. We don't ever take time to appreciate what we've got in the moment. We're always looking for the next thing, and that was really sort of stuck with me and made me think. Actually, he's got a very good point there.
You remind me of a story I heard yesterday about Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch 22. He was at a party in Los Angeles, at a billionaire's party, and his friend said, this gentleman has earned more money in a day than your famous book has probably earned in 2 or 3 years. And Heller turned to him and said, well, I have something he hasn't got. And his friend said, you couldn't possibly. What would that be? And he said, enough.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's so important to realize that we are enough as we are. And I saw a picture with you, Tom, with Prince William, and mental health is the great leveler. It doesn't respect title or privilege or
no.
traditions or the money in the bank. It's very democratic. And I'm wondering, Tom, what characteristic, quality, or attribute has helped you or carried you through tough times?
I think the fact that my upbringing was very, I was always loved and I was always encouraged and I was never scared. If I failed, there was always support for me. So I knew I always had a great support, and I'm really, really lucky in that. And that enabled me to take risks and do things like the Lions Barber Collective when I was sold my shop and my accountant said, "What are you doing, giving up a business so you can work for free for a charity and set up your own charity?" And my parents, but they always supported me through that. So I think knowing that you had that support and that resilience there builds up the resilience there. Sorry. And I think I moved around a lot as a child. We moved different places. So we moved from Kent to the Isle of Man, down to Devon, and we moved around a few places as well within those places. So I built up a resilience to change and a resilience to new people, and leaving people and meeting new people and new relationships. So I think I built up a resilience just naturally through my years. And I think being a hairdresser, you become a social chameleon. You learn so much from people. You evolve to every client that's in your chair, and you have everyone from psychiatrists to, like ex-cons or cleaners to doctors to I don't know, mechanics to everyone. And it's really, really interesting the way you sort of pick up and learn from other people. You can be a bit of a sponge.
Have you ever been starstruck, Tom?
People say like the Prince William thing, and it was a bit of a weird one because I was so busy and there was so much going on. I didn't really think about it until he was there in front of me. But he was so kind and generous with his time and is really genuine. Really, I feel there wasn't too much of that. Um, you know, this is a sort of a bit of a guilty pleasure, but I'm a big wrestling fan,
Mm.
and that's my sort of like 10-year-old boy inside me, my getaway. I go and watch that every week for a few hours, and I've met a few wrestlers and cut their hair, but I've sort of tapped them up online, sort of said, "Do you want a free haircut? I've seen you're in town," and some of them have said yes. And there's been moments where I've done that and gone backstage, and there's all these wrestlers there, and a 10-year-old boy in me is kind
Mm.
of freaking out a little bit. But again, they're just normal people, aren't they? They all have a haircut. Once you start cutting their hair, you have a conversation with them, and I think that is the beauty of that, the medium of a haircut.
What has life taught you personally or professionally that you would have loved that 10-year-old Tom to have known, that would have saved him a lot of turbulent times growing up as a teenager?
I think I consider myself quite lucky. I think I've had quite a good time, but I think it's because I'm quite positive on my outlook and stuff. But there's times where you have breakups with girlfriends at the end of the world when you're a teenager and all that shit. And I think my dad sort of said to me, look, he said, these hard decisions now are good in the future, and they will come good, and things do get better. And
Mm.
just telling me those things, when I was young growing up, and those things have obviously really, really helped me moving forward. And the hard things you do. I remember I was going to become an educator, and my dad said to me, I nearly didn't do it. I had to have medication for anti-anxiety. I had a panic attack cutting my mate's hair talking about it. And this started this whole journey. I wouldn't be doing it now if I hadn't have done that day. And I
Mm.
said to my dad, I don't think I can do it. And he said to me, look, he said, if you don't do it, they'll never ask you to do it again, and that'll be the end of it. But he said, if you do it, the worst thing that can happen is you mess up and they never ask you to do it again, or you might do good and they'll ask you to come back and it could start something else. And he told me that he had a trial at Charlton Athletic. He was a goalkeeper and he didn't go, and he's never regretted anything more than that in his entire life. So I think my dad gave me good advice for the years, but that kind of thing is that the things that have taken me further in my career or life are always the things that have scared me outside of my comfort
Mm.
zone, like the TED Talk. I didn't want to do that. I was terrified. But my wife said I had to do it and work me through it. And it was one of the best things I ever did. So, yeah, I think, yeah, to not be afraid and everything will be okay. I think that's it, isn't it? Everything will be okay.
What a great message to feel the fear and do it anyway. In your book, Tom, Barber Talk, you say something that you say yes to things because it's not a
Yeah.
good enough reason to say no. And that takes courage, but with that courage comes opportunity. With that opportunity can come a game changer.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it's really important. I do say yes to most things, and I think it's really important to do that because you meet people, you never know what's going to happen, you never know who's going to, especially now I'm trying to tell this message and get this message out there. There's someone may see this, and it may make the difference between life and death, and it's so important. I think it's like you say, feel the fear, do it anyway even if you're going to get through it. I mean, the TED Talk was one of the best things I ever did. My wife was due date was 2 days before. If you watch it, you'll see her in the crowd with a huge bump. And I was praying that she would have the baby, so I didn't have to do this. And I struggled to get the script right, and I really, really did. I had some sleepless nights over it, but I did it anyway. And I just say yes to these things because, like you say, luck is a mixture of opportunity and preparation, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you have the opportunity and you're prepared for it, or you prepare for it, then you're going to move forward in life. It's just the way it is.
So you're a triple threat, Tom. You are a parent, an educator, and a hairdresser. I'm talking to real royalty here.
I wouldn't go that far.
Tom, I had a young man in my office last year, and he said, Sir, I wish I could run so fast that my thoughts couldn't catch up with me.
Mm.
Tom, what do you attribute the rising levels of anxiety, particularly with young people, to? And I know you've got a particular passion for men's mental health. Sometimes we take out our emotions, or we don't have I suspect with young people, they don't, and young males particularly, they don't have a vernacular around emotions. And
Mm.
yet the emotions will come out sometimes in less appropriate ways, sometimes through violence or sometimes through frustration. What's going on, Tom, with people or young people particularly?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could put yeah, it. The problem is it's so individual. We're all individuals. Every case is individual. Everyone has a different upbringing, a different reaction to things, different live in different areas, and how we deal with trauma. But I think the anxiety is there's so much access to content and news and stuff all the time. There's so much more to be anxious about. I think, when I was younger, it was the newspapers once a day, you know, and that was it. Now it's constant Twitter, Instagram, the internet. There's constant just stuff being fed at them. And should I be scared about this? Should I be worried about this? There's conspiracies about this, and anyone can write anything online. And I think if you can get into a wormhole, can't you? You go down this wormhole into this world and build yourself up and worry and panic and and again, I think there's a problem with isolation. But I think it's always been there. I think we're starting to realise this thing. Like our physical health has always been there. We've known that for a long time now. The last 50 years, we've come a long way with physical health care and physical health and recognising things. I think we're just scratching the surface of mental health. We've had it. It's been a problem for a long time, but it's probably been labelled as something else. And I think the fact that we're starting to realize that we all have that. And once we understand that, and like you said with men, we're particularly bad at it because we've got very good at pretending to be okay. Because when we do talk about it or we do open up about it, we get shut down quite quickly because people aren't comfortable with it. Other men aren't comfortable with it. The women in our lives aren't comfortable with it because we've been portrayed by society for such a long time as not having those feelings, as
Mm.
being strong and being the breadwinner or being that whatever these roles are. And I think from my point of view, I think what I've seen when I've gone around and talked to different people, when I talk to some of the younger people, we do pop-ups at universities. Some of those lads, they'll sit in the chair. I don't even talk about hair for the first 50 minutes. They sit in their chair, they know why we're there, and they just open up to me. They talk to me about all sorts of stuff that I won't say here, but they just tell me all sorts of stuff. But then the older generation, I think, might look at my dad, and they kind of had a bit more sort of, they knew that everyone knew where they were, whereas you sort of in this middle, there's this transitional generation where, am I allowed to do this? Should I do that? What should I say? Is this right? Is that right? Is that? And there's a lot of guys that I speak to that are in this world where they're like, am I allowed to buy a girl a drink? Am I not allowed to do this? Should I be the breadwinner or should I not? Or if I am in that situation, am I going to get attacked because we live a traditional style? And so there's a lot of guys I know that in their sort of mid 20s to mid 40s that seems to be an issue as well. They just don't know what their role is, where they stand in society anymore, and they're very searching and confused.
The tectonic plates are very shaky ground. Tom, are you hopeful that we're coming into a different space and place in terms of mental health and the discussions around it? It strikes me in the past there was always a stigma and a shame around mental health. And what we would do is we would sweep things under the carpet. And of course, the problem is whatever you sweep underneath there stays there. Are we coming
Yeah.
to a more mature place where we can actually have these conversations openly?
Yeah, I think there's twofold really. I think we're moving on. We're talking about mental health. We are getting to a point now where people are starting to talk. So we need to move on to the how do I react and how do I listen. You know, go. Oh, thank you for telling me. I'm here if you want to talk, and then just let this person listen and keep throwing it back to them. But also, I think we're still lacking these spaces for conversation.
Mm,
These communal hubs where people used to go to the pub and talk, or they used to, I don't know, sit around a family table and have conversations.
mm.
That's happening less and less. There isn't that sort of support groups. We're losing that kind of art of conversation, like gathering around the fire, telling stories to each other. And I think we need to kind of move back towards that and reevaluate the importance of that human connection because technology is amazing. Don't get me wrong. We're moving forward and it's incredible what we can do. And the fact that we can even have this conversation because
Yeah.
10 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to do this. We would have had to meet up in real life, which would be lovely as well. But it is amazing that we can do this. But I think it's about getting that balance, isn't it, moving forward? Taking back some of the old of gathering together and talking and being with each other and having that human connection, but also now being more aware of what mental health is, being prepared for the conversations, being prepared to respond well and react well and throw the ball back to them, sorry, rather than saying, oh yeah, I went through this, going, tell me more.
Throw the ball back and let the story be about the person and let them actually just talk.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, when we're doing the training, I kind of use this as an example when we're teaching the barbers now about it. Say, I've got a client in my chair. They come in, they're tanned. I notice that, and I ask them, "So what? Oh, you got a great tan. Have you been somewhere nice?" And they go, "Yeah, yeah, I've been to Brazil." And I go, "I love Brazil. Brazil's one of my favorite countries I've ever worked. When I was in Rio, I did this, and when I was in that, I did this." And they don't care. They really don't care. Actually, what we should do is go, "Oh, wow, I love Brazil. I've been there. Tell me more. Tell me what was your favorite place? Where did you go to eat? What did you do? Where did you?" And throw it back to them. And we just need to use that skill more in life, I think, generally, not just about mental health, but when you meet someone and they tell you they've been somewhere that you've been, throw it back to them first. Your story can wait, but we're trained to have that relate and talk, and we don't like pauses and silences, but actually give the ball back to them.
Finally, Tom, in a world of talkers, the listener is king. Should we be teaching listening in schools?
Yes, definitely, definitely. I'm actually in the process of the training that I developed with the four pillars: recognize, ask, listen, and help. I'm actually in the process of working with VTCT, who are one of the awarding bodies, to turn it into a qualification that can be taught in colleges, FEs, colleges, schools, things like that, as a proper qualification, which is really exciting because this is part of this whole thing of we talked before about legacy and things continuing on beyond. But if hopefully, even if I can get it into the industry curriculum for barbers or hairdressers or beauticians, or hopefully all three. For example, here in Torquay, there's one college that teaches hair and beauty in Torbay, where I live. In 10, 15 years, if that becomes part of their curriculum, every single hair and beautician will be trained in this area, which means that every hairdressers or barbers or beauticians will be a safe space for people.
So, could I finish off by saying anybody who's been listening to this conversation, please reach out to the Samaritans or to a friend. It's so good to talk, to share with a friend or a trusted confidant. And Tom, thank you so much for all you've done to raise the profile of mental health and mental awareness. And you have left a great legacy. And could I encourage people to watch your TED Talk? It's a joy. Tom, go well and positively.
Thank you so much.